Thanks for meeting us. I'm super excited to be there to tell you about Eagle Flight. Please switch off your phones if you have them on. So, my name is Olivier Palmieri. I'm game director at Ubisoft. I've been working at Ubisoft for about 20 years now, working on various brands of the company. Also working at what we call the Ubisoft Design Academy, where I taught for 18 months principles of design within Ubisoft. So today in my talk, I will be talking about the VR R&D part, the phase where we started to do some R&D, then the VR motion discomfort problems we found during that research. Talking about the solutions we found to make comfortable VR when there is motion, and also my top 3 takeaways. So the R&D we started in September 2014, a bit more than 2 years ago, and we gathered as a small group of VR enthusiasts within Ubisoft. We wanted to look into what VR could offer, this new medium, how we can use it to its best, how we could study it, and what could be the issues that we could have with VR, specifically the nausea problem that we could have. So we studied that, and we really wanted to study the functions of the VR headsets first. So what can be best for VR headsets in terms of controls, in terms of intuitiveness, what should we do, what shouldn't we do in terms of experience in it. And it's what we call in design form follows function. So you study the functions first, and then you build a form on top of it. So that's really what we wanted to do. And it's in a way what Steve Jobs also is believing in. So in that R&D phase, we studied lots of human biological elements. One of them was the inner ear. So we have in each of our ears circular canals, X, Y, Z, and that detects when you tilt your head to the left, to the right, or when you move it forward or back. It's really detecting very accurately any position your head is having. And it's crazy because it's really the XYZ axis, and we have each of those in each of our ear. We studied also an effect called the saccadic eyes motion. So when we follow an object, our eyes tend to have a saccadic behavior. They don't follow a motion super smoothly, but they are having kind of a saccadic effect. And on the right here, we have one of our team members called Felix. And we were testing in the studio this saccadic eyes motion effect. So it works both ways when you turn on yourself, or when you don't turn your head, but you try to track something moving around. And finally, we studied also the relation between the eyes and the ear. That's called the vestibulo-ocular reflex. And in fact,
I want you to.
Sorry. When you move quickly your head, your eyes are adjusting automatically, and it's a behavior, it's really a connection we have between our ears and our eyes that makes our eyes really adjust automatically. So you will see that video talking about it. It's a bit scary and funny at the same time, and you will see that reflex happening.
I want you to look at that point right at the very distant part of the wall. Keep focused right there, and don't move your eyes. Keep focused, and I'm going to turn your head quickly, but you keep looking over there.
So yeah, it's a bit strange, but in fact, if we receive a motion that we are not controlling, the inner ear detects the motion and will adjust automatically the position of the eyes to still focus on the object we are looking at. that's another. So that's a picture that NASA is not diffusing so much, but they also have space sickness issues for astronauts. As you can see, it can be really problematic if that happens in space while astronauts are repairing satellites or stuff like that. And it's really a lot of people, a lot of astronauts that have the same kind of issue, space sickness. So we studied what they were doing about that, because for sure NASA is trying to reduce this space sickness problem. So among the possible solutions they use, they have what they called NASA, the stroboscopic treatment. So basically they are inserting black frames in between the eyes at a certain frequency to calm down the nausea for astronauts. So that's something we tested also ourselves. In the end, it didn't work so well for us, for Eagle Flight, but we really wanted to study everything that was existing about reducing nausea. Lastly, we also discussed with glasses manufacturers, and we studied it, and you can have the same kind of issue wearing glasses. When you wear new glasses for the first time, or when you switch new glasses, you can have nausea for a few days or a few weeks, usually about 2 weeks, and it's still the same issue. It's because your vision changed compared to your inner ear, as I will describe more after, and it's all related to the same problem. So finally, we also studied perception of motion, how it works, conflicting behaviors or signals between the motion and what we see in the vision, etc. So we really tried to study as much as we could during the research and made many prototypes. So based on that, we developed prototypes. We had focus. So our first focus was for sure to have a VR that was comfortable. We didn't want to settle on using teleport systems or not having motion. We were really believing that there was solutions to have comfortable motion in VR. I couldn't settle on the fact that we were doomed to not have motion and not being able to fly at full speed in VR. So we really wanted to find solutions. We really wanted to use the VR headset in a way that is as intuitive and accessible as possible. That would help us to test the prototype with as many people as possible within Ubisoft or outside of Ubisoft. And when you have something that is very intuitive, then it's easy to test it with everybody. Still, accessibility doesn't mean that your game or your experience cannot be precise. And we really wanted to have an experience that could be super precise and super reactive. So you could really have depth in controls and in gameplay. One of our first prototype was called Inside Notre Dame. It was a social experience. You were exploring inside Notre Dame of Paris. There was 6 players, and it was about moving inside Notre Dame and exploring. And it's a social experience, and we showed it at 2 events in Montreal. So one was called Chromatic, and the other one C2 Montreal. And the C2 even put us as a picture on their website as the main picture to represent the C2 event. So here's a small glimpse of the Notre Dame experience. In parallel, we also worked on Eagle Flight, the first prototypes. Back then, it was it was a prototype, so we didn't work on the visuals first. We really wanted to test the controls, make sure that we had a comfortable game, still flying at full speed. And here you will have a quick video of the first prototype we made. So quickly internally, we use that prototype to show it and demo it within Ubisoft to a lot of people to refine it and test the controls, test the comforts. We also went after at E3 2015 behind closed doors to test the prototype, a more advanced and refined prototype in multiplayer already, with many journalists, many people to see if we had something and if other companies also maybe found other solutions or if there were similar games. And in fact, that's where we found that we had a very interesting prototype and it was very interesting to make a game out of it because a lot of people really enjoyed playing the prototype. It was very simple to get in and play and very enjoyable. So that's when we decided to make a game out of it. And that's when we joined a division of Ubisoft called the Funhouse to make the game. We also came after at the GDC 2016 last year to show our first version of the game. It was at the Ubisoft booth, and we demoed it, and also we had very good feedback from people playing it. It helped us also, again, to refine it, and yeah, we had quite good press about it. So here's a short video from the visuals from the prototype to the final game we shipped. Okay, so again, more on accessibility, precision, and reactivity. So as I said, we went to many events and testing the game, and the fact that it's intuitive helped us a lot to demo it and get some feedback on it, and have as many people as possible to try it, even people that never played video games. Like on the people on the left here never played a video game, and they were at the beginning not sure to want to play Eagle Flight, but then I convinced them, they played it, and in fact after they just wanted to continue to fly in VR, so that was cool. We had also the chance to have the Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau testing Eagle Flight that you can see on the right, and he also had fun with the game. So one of the reasons we chose controlling the game with your head is to have direct controls. So because everything is happening in your head, you don't need to interface, you don't need to control with your thumbs a joystick to learn how to control an eagle in the game. Everything happens in your head, and so it's very, very direct. As soon as you want to go somewhere, you go there because the controls are where you look is where you go. So it's super direct and super accurate. And also naturally, when you want to dodge something, because like if there's an obstacle coming, you would duck to dodge it. That's happening in the game too, so it makes it very simple and very direct to control and super precise. So to give you an idea of the precision, here's one of the catacomb levels we have in the game. Okay, so 5 main causes we found for motion discomfort. The first one and the main one is when your vision is not in agreement with your inner ear. So when what you see is not corresponding exactly to what you perceive in terms of balance, mostly within your ears. And it's not only due to VR. In fact, it's happening in a lot of occasions, in a lot of possible other ways. Like you can be sick at sea, in a car, in space, in other simulations. So it's all linked to the same thing. It's the fact that what you see doesn't correspond to your inner ear, and that can make you sick. So why? It's a defense mechanism from the brain, in fact, since the early ages, to make sure that you do not ingest poison. And that was very useful when, in the early ages, humans had to gather food and to make sure that it's not poisonous. And it's still something that we have within our body today, and that can cause nausea. So when your sense of balance may not be accurately corresponding to what you see, the brain thinks it's a drug, it's a toxin, and it tries to eject the poison. So that's the nausea problem we feel. It works 2 ways. So when you feel emotions but you don't see it, so it can be in a boat when you have a room without windows and you can feel motion but you don't perceive why there is motion. It's also very frequent when you are in a car and you are reading a book, for example, in the back of a car. Your eyes tell you the book is not moving, the text is not moving, but the car is moving around. So there is something happening, so it can trigger nausea. In space, it's the contrary. You can see motion, but you don't feel it. So space is an example because the inner ear works with gravity. And because there is no gravity in space, then the inner ears do not send information to the brain to confirm with the vision. And so that's why many astronauts in space can be sick. A second element that we know is that if we have unstable frame rate, low frame rate, stutters, or bad prediction, or even if the image freezes, that can create discomfort. And in fact, it's very linked. It's linked to the same thing. It's because at some point, if your vision is not corresponding to your inner ears anymore, then the nausea is triggered. So the freeze, imagine if you turn your head and the picture freezes, but your inner ears still communicate to your brain that it's moving, then that's why it's problematic. It's the same for low frame rate and the wrong movement prediction where your vision shows a certain movement and your inner ear doesn't correspond exactly to that. Something else is when you perceive a lot of motion, especially in close proximity. Even if it's corresponding visually and within your inner ear, even if it's the same, because you perceive a lot of motion, if you don't feel it, then that can be problematic, especially within the peripheral vision. And I will come back to that later. It's not only motion, it's also acceleration. So our inner ears also detect accelerations and decelerations. It's very accurate, and also, so if you see accelerations, even if it's accurate, it's going forward, and your ear, it's okay for your ear. If there's too much acceleration or deceleration, then it's going to be problematic. Finally, that's what we tested that also. Going through virtual worlds is jarring. VR is very immersive. The brain really believes that the player is in a virtual world. And if you go through a virtual world, your brain expects a reaction. It expects to stop because we are not used in real life to go through worlds. And when you do that, then it can trigger nausea. It's problematic for your brain. So a summary of the 5 main causes for VR discomfort. As I said, conflicts between the vision and inner ears, visual continuity not met, fast motion in close proximity, visual perception only of acceleration, and your brain, if your brain expects a collision, that does not happen. So based on that, we try to find solutions to make a game with motion comfortable. Respecting the fact that your vision and inner ear should be corresponding, we decided that every time you move your head with the VR headset, it should be the same in the game. So that's why you control with your VR headset. That's why where you look is where you go. It's because we want to, at all times, be in line with it, with where your head is in terms of position and orientation, and how you see the world within the game. So when you look up and forward with your head in the real world, then that's where you go. That's what you do inside the game, and it's always respecting that rule. So I've been asked many times, okay, can you do a looping in Eagle Flight? Yes, you can, but you have to do that. You have to do a looping yourself if you want to do a looping in Eagle Flight. I tested it, kind of that. I tested to fly head down, and it's working, and it's fun. You can do something like Top Gun if you want. But yeah, you really have to do yourself what you want to do within the game. So now we respect always the head position and orientation, but we need to not have acceleration or deceleration. So we decided to have constant linear forward vection. Vection is the perception of motion. So having a constant vection allows to not change the acceleration and to be OK for the brain. So in Eagle Flight, you are always going forward. You do not stop in the air. If we stop at some point to land on buildings, on landmarks, then we have a transition between the two. But mostly in the game, you always go forward. And because, as I said, the inner ear sense acceleration, it's a great system we have in our ears. It's crazy. And it detects very accurately accelerations. We had to use continuous motion. So because of that, continuous motion is the best. Still, we can play around having slight deceleration, acceleration, but we really have to work around it. We really have to find techniques or to make it, but to play around it to make it okay for the brain. But what we cannot do is it's stop instantly or give a speed boost to the player instantly. Otherwise, that will create nausea. So in terms of acceleration, we worked visually with speed lines, with effects, with leaves floating around to give a certain sense of acceleration or deceleration, still being within the limits to not trigger nausea. So we really worked to refine this acceleration, deceleration, and to make it work. So here's a small video about it. In terms of collision, because we cannot go through collisions or because we cannot stop, then we had to reinforce the collision system. So as I said, we cannot stop instantly. That would be bad for the inner ear and the visual. That would trigger nausea. And we also can't change player's direction, like bump him to another direction, because then the visual would say something and the inner ears would say some other things, and it wouldn't work. And we cannot also go through the collisions. It would be problematic also for the brain. So one solution we choose is quickly fade to black when you approach a collision. As you will see in the video, even before you are about to hit the wall, we also start to fade the screen and have dynamic blinders going. And we try to hide, in fact, what's happening in terms of visual. So the brain cannot compare the inner ear with the visuals because there is no more visual when you fade to black. And in fact, Devil is in the details, so it's not just that. You will see again in the video, I slowed down. We have a transition between the motion and the black screen. We still have the particles for like 1 second to ease the transition between the two, and the text saying that you crashed. We cannot make it appear right away, because if we do that, then your eyes would see it, and for your brain it would be like, okay, I see an instant stop, and that's bad. So we have particle smoothing, then the screen is completely black, and then we have the text appear in fade after. So we worked a lot on that transition, and it's really helping us. It helped us a lot to make the game comfortable. Something else that is well known in VR to bring more comfort is create what we call a cockpit effect, a fixed reference. So we saw that in VR experiences with planes or spaceships. You can have similar effects with helmets. And also, there is an issue in VR. When you put a VR headset on, then you don't see your nose anymore. And in fact, your brain is used to see your nose at all time during the day. But your brain is removing it from the vision system. And in fact, what is funny is when I'm seeing that, usually people start to see their own nose. So I'm sure it's happening to some of you today. And it's constantly there. So in fact, as I'm telling it, I'm seeing my nose, and maybe some of you are also, but the brain is removing that information. The thing is, when you put a VR headset, then you don't see your nose anymore. So for your brain, it's problematic. It's like, why is this happening? So for the reference, to give a fixed reference and to bring back the nose to the game, in fact, that's the reason we added the beak. As an eagle, you fly above Paris and you have a beak because you are an eagle, so for sure. And it helps you for a fixed reference, and it also helps your brain to get back a nose where it should be within the vision. Something I forgot to say since the beginning, there's not like one solution to make VR comfortable when you have motion, but it's really a combination of many, many solutions. So everything that I said and everything that I will continue to say, it's the combination of all of that makes VR comfortable with motion. So it's like everything brings up more and more comfort, but you need all of them to make, we needed all of them to make Eagle Flight very comfortable for most. So one other thing we could work on, okay, we know people have VR headsets. We know we can play on the sound. We know we can play on the visuals. We also know we can play on the vibrations because people play with a pad. And so we used the haptic feedbacks. We used vibration to reinforce the fact that the players are really within that experience and that it's true and they're flying, and for the brain it should be okay. So that's another way, another meaning we use to make it comfortable. Something else we worked on, we studied the fact that when we keep the brain of the player busy, very busy, it's good for comfort, because in fact our brain has is kind of a CPU. It has a certain processing power and a limited processing power. So the more we keep the brain busy doing something or thinking about something, the less it will try to compare the vision and the inner ear signals to trigger nausea. And that's one of the reasons why we worked on the multiplayer already from the prototype. We for sure worked on it because it was fun, but it was also to try to see what was the impact of keeping the brain as busy as possible within VR to make it comfortable. And in multiplayer, you have opponents, you have teammates, you have to capture the prey, you have to chase people, or you get pursued, and your brain is really occupied by everything it has to do, and it's also helping in comfort in Eagle Flight. Visuals of the game have an impact too. So from the beginning to the final game we shipped, we worked on refining the visuals for sure, but also making sure that they were going in line with the comfort we wanted to have for the game. And here's an example with a water texture we had in the prototype, where it was more detailed, and what we noticed is when you fly above that, because it's of those details, you were perceiving a lot of motion, and that was problematic for the players. They were seeing a lot of motion in their close proximity, also in their peripheral vision, and that was problematic for comfort. So we refined every visual of the game, including the water, to make it as comfortable as possible. So everything we did in Eagle Flight from the beginning to the end, we made sure to keep the game comfortable, and we worked on the visuals, the sound, everything, the controls to make it comfortable. And so in the case of the water, here's the final, close to final visuals we have in the game. So it still looks beautiful, but there is less references on the texture that show you how fast you're moving, and it's more comfortable. So from the prototype, as I said, to the final game, we worked on the visuals and to make sure it's always comfortable and also readable and also beautiful, but really to make sure it's comfortable. So another element we can work on to make the game comfortable is sound. Sound helps for comfort. So the inner ear is not hearing the sounds, but playing with the sound, we can make the brain believe more that it's really happening. It's really you are really flying as an eagle above Paris. And with the wing flapping sound, we made it more theatrical to really convince the brain that it's happening, and it should be okay to fly up, fly down, to dive. And even if you get a slight acceleration diving down, it should be okay because we reinforce the sound when you dive. You can hear the flapping sound. And it's really working, reinforcing the sounds to make your brain believe it's really happening really helps. Another example we did, when you go from the left to the right, we have more volume, more sound to the left or to the right to, again, convince your brain that it's really happening, that it should be okay to turn and move into this world. So, I don't know if you can hear it, but the balance is different normally to the left or to the right. And it's normal because if you were flying as an eagle, then when you turn, the wind is faster on one ear than compared to the other. So we are trying to replicate what should be happening for the brain. One final element we studied, it's the peripheral vision. One thing we studied is how it's working in the animal kingdom and for humans. And what is interesting is that when you are animals that are more predators have have less peripheral vision, but more focused vision. They are have a more refined vision more precise vision in the center to focus on their prey and go grab them, as opposed to praise. In this example for a goat, you can see in her eye that she has a very large peripheral vision, and it helps them to detect a predator within a very large peripheral vision. So if a predator comes from the far left or the far right, they can detect it and run away. As humans, we are kind of in the middle of that. And it was also useful for us as humans because at the early edges, we had to chase animals. It could be mammoths, it could be tigers, it could be dangerous animals, and it was helping us to detect motion and run if there was danger. The thing is, today, it can act against us, and that's really in that peripheral vision, and especially the far peripheral vision, that we are very, very sensitive to motion. We are much less sensitive to colors. Like in the far peripheral vision, you don't see colors, you don't really see shapes, but you detect very accurately motion. And so that's why we worked on what we call the dynamic blinders within Eagle Flight. So because you can detect very accurately motion in peripheral vision, then we decided to try to hide it, especially when you go close to objects, close to obstacles, and when you see it in very close proximity. So that's a picture from the first prototype, and because we go close to a wall to the right and we are close to the ground on the bottom, then we trigger a blinder to the right and to the bottom. And you can see on the left or on the top, there's no blinders. There can be, because it's really coming from left, right, top, down, but it's really depending on when we detect that there is a lot of motion. And lots of motion, it's really when you are close to something and when you see objects and obstacles going very quickly in your peripheral vision. We are also doing the dynamic blinders when you tilt. So in Eagle Flight, we have a special control called the tilt control. You tilt your head to the left to turn to the left, or you tilt to the right to turn to the right. And also when you do that, then you can get a lot of motion in your peripheral vision, especially if you tilt to the left, you have the city scrolling in your vision on the left. So we are hiding that city, that motion on the left, and to the right, we hide motion on the right. And here you have a video of the first, one of the first prototypes where you can see the first works on the dynamic blinders. So when you see that, you might think that it's going to be disturbing when you play Eagle Flight to have that constantly. But in fact, we did many tests with hundreds of people and thousands of people then even, and most of the people do not see that within the game. You see it because you see it on the screen, but when you play the game, you are so focused on where you want to go, where you are flying, and motion is so fast that you don't see it. Also, it's a very natural process for the brain to focus and to remove peripheral vision. It's in fact happening. It's very well known for Formula 1 race drivers, where the brain is naturally reducing the peripheral vision and to focus on the center of the vision because the motion is going very fast and pilots need to be very accurate and very reactive. So it's a very natural process for the brain. And in fact, when we did many tests, not showing the screen first, having people playing within the VR experience, the vast majority of people never saw the blinders. When they were playing and then removing the headset and we were showing them the game on the TV screens, they were very surprised to see that happening, and like most of them didn't even see it in the VR headset. So I know there's been some discussions on is it going to be cool to have those blinders at all time? If you don't think about it, it's a very natural process for your brain, and you can play Eagle Flight without noticing it. So in summary, what we used in Eagle Flight as main solutions for comfort are the dynamic blinders, respect at all times player's head position and orientation, and that's key, having constant forward motion, fade to black on collisions, and on some other transitions. We added the beak and eyebrows of an eagle. We used the sound to support motion as much as we could, making them theatrical. And we used the haptic feedback from the gamepad to also help on that. So finally, my top 3 takeaways from developing Eagle Flight. We have to ensure that our VR experiences are comfortable for most. If we want VR to be successful, it would be best to have as many people play VR and be comfortable in VR, because if they are sick, then probably they will not get back to VR, and it's not going to work very well for us in the VR industry. So that worked very well for us to use our head as a controller to make it comfortable. You can try to use other solutions, but I think it's key to try to make a VR experience which is as comfortable as possible for as many people as possible. We should never force motion to the player. This is like 2 examples where if we would show those kind of motion to the player without trying to hide motion or have blinders or use any special trick, then it would be bad. So for future VR experiences, it would be great to have always techniques to try to hide motion. So in the case of the car, that's not an actual VR game, it's another racing game, but if we would happen to have such motion, then we really would it would be really great to find solutions to hide motion. So using fade to blacks, using blurred vision, using any techniques we could to hide what's happening visually, and it would make sense anyway if we crash to not see all those motion, would make it more comfortable. And that's I hope that many of the incoming VR experiences having motion will use tricks as we did to make it comfortable. Finally, VR, it's a new medium. It's been out for about a year now, but still we need to develop, especially for VR, we need to study how to use the best of VR. In my opinion, we shouldn't try to force fantasy a world into VR and hope it will work. We should first study what can be best for VR, what can be not so good for VR, and try to focus on what is best and create really the world and the fantasy and the universe and the form on top of it. So for example, in Eagle Flight, controlling with our head, maybe some people said to me, okay, but why isn't it dragons flying, or why are you not controlling a plane or a drone or whatever? Because we have very, very accurate controls. As soon as you turn your head, it turns into the game. And also, we cannot do loopings unless you do it also yourself in real life, as I said. Then a plane is not the best thing for that. A dragon, maybe you would expect some inertia, same for a drone. So really keeping it for an organic creature was the best. So that's one also of the reasons why we kept it as an eagle. And it's really the form that came after studying the functions and how to make the game as comfortable as possible. If you want to know more, Vicky Ferguson, that was lead programmer on Eagle Flight, gave a talk also yesterday. Maybe you saw it on Eagle Flight, the technical postmortem. Otherwise, you might see it on the GDC Vault soon. Thank you.